For many, the most memorable of Napoleon's achievements were his military conquests, which laid the basis of his empire in Europe. His early military successes in Italy had been noted before. Following these, he had taken an army to Egypt to try to disrupt British power in the eastern Mediterranean. The campaign was a failure, and he returned to France and joined the plot to overthrow the Directory. The need for an early victory and a quick peace after this coup of November 1799 was in order to strengthen his position as First Consul. It led Napoleon back to Italy. There, in June 1800, after a march across the Alps, he inflicted a decisive defeat on the Austrians. A further French victory in Bavaria 6 months later brought about the Peace of Lunéville. It recognized French possession of Belgium, as well as the left bank of the Rhine and the gains in Italy. Austria lost control of all of northern Italy except for Venetia, and its influence in Germany was reduced. With the collapse of the Second Coalition, Britain agreed to the Peace of Amiens, by which France withdrew from the Papal States and Naples, and Britain returned most of its conquests, including Egypt, which was restored to the Ottoman Empire. The peace settlement proved to be unstable, in effect nothing more than a truce in a war that had already been going on for almost a decade. After a period of increasing bad relations between France and Britain, the war resumed once again on May 18, 1803. While France was a dominant power on land, Britain was in clear control of the sea. Neither in itself was sufficient for victory. Napoleon tried to fix this by planning an invasion of Britain. A large army was to be transported across the English Channel by a combined Franco-Spanish fleet. The plan failed when the Royal Navy under Lord Admiral Nelson won a great battle off of Trafalgar on the 21st of October 1805. Even before this disaster, Napoleon had gathered up his army of England and marched south to the Danube to confront Austria, who had declared war on France during the summer. The campaigns of 1805 to 1807 that followed Napoleon's departure from Boulogne showed him at his military best, winning a series of crushing victories against the armies of Austria, Prussia, and Russia. The Austrians were outmaneuvered and forced to surrender at Ulm in October 1805. The defeat of an Austro-Russian army at Austerlitz in December caused Russia to retreat rapidly out of Napoleon's reach, and Austria too agreed to the Treaty of Pressburg, which recognized French supremacy in northern Italy and the loss of Austrian authority in Germany. Complicated negotiations between Napoleon and Prussia, involving Prussia's acquisition of Hanover in return for adherence to Napoleon's continental system, led to a breakdown of relations and then to war between the two countries. In a remarkable one-week campaign, Napoleon destroyed Prussia at the twin battles of Jena and Ostend. In February 1807, Napoleon marched through Poland to attack Russia, his remaining continental enemy, winning a technical victory over the Russians. A major defeat at Friedland in June convinced the Russians of the need to make peace. This was done in July of 1807 at Tilsit, in a personal meeting between Napoleon and Tsar Alexander I that took place initially on a raft in the middle of a river which marked the Russian frontier. In 2 years, in a series of short campaigns, Napoleon had in turn defeated 3 of his 4 opponents. In November 1806, he established the Continental Blockade to deal with the remaining one, Great Britain, who had taken no active part in the current war, restricting itself to simply supplying allies. French domination in Germany by defeating Austria and abolishing the Holy Roman Empire was just one of Napoleon's many achievements. He also oversaw the creation of the Confederation of the Rhine, the destruction of Prussian power in Poland, which was converted into the Grand Duchy of Warsaw. Prussia's lands in the west was created into a new satellite kingdom called Westphalia. Napoleon crowned himself King of Italy and added Parma and Tuscany to the existing French possessions of Piedmont and Lombardy. Naples became a French satellite state. Russia was forced to concede to peace in 1807. By the end of 1807, Napoleon controlled directly or indirectly the greater part of Europe. The Grand Empire had come into being. Here's a map of Europe at Napoleon's greatest strength, 1810. You can see in purple the extent of the French Empire, and what he hadn't defeated, he had yet defeated and forced into treaties. All that was left was this right here. I should not include Ireland because Ireland was like, come on, Napoleon, take over this place. But otherwise, this and Portugal was left as well. And there's my dog. During the years of 1805 to 1807, Napoleon created in essence what became the Grand Empire. On the battlefields of Europe, his forces were triumphant. His victories were gained as a consequence of a number of interrelated factors. Among these were circumstances that related to him personally and those concerned with the changing nature of warfare and the opponents he faced. One of the most important reasons for Napoleon's success was his leadership qualities. He was a great general who achieved important conquests in a relatively short space of time, but also knew how to exploit his victories to extract the maximum advantage for those he defeated. French domination therefore relied on diplomatic success as well as military achievements, and the great achievement of French diplomacy was to keep the coalition powers divided. Through the issue of daily bulletins, Napoleon formed a special bond between himself and the army. He played on ideas of military glory, of patriotism, and of friendship, while giving at the same time the impression that he had a deep paternal concern for his men. Napoleon's army was a product of the Revolution, which had brought into existence a mass army forged in the belief that they were spreading revolutionary ideas. His army was based on the strength of the whole nation. Between 1801 and 1805, Napoleon created what became the Grande Armee. The whole army was divided into corps of about 25,000 to 30,000 men, each composed of 2 or 3 divisions, infantry and cavalry. Some of the cavalry were kept separate, as were the reserve artillery and several elite groups, the most important of which was the Imperial Guard. He controlled the army directly, which allowed unity of command and flexibility in action. Each corps was given a particular role on a campaign march, but this role could, if necessary, be changed quickly. New tactics were developed which emphasized troop mobility. Infantry were required to march 12 to 15 miles a day and living off the land instead of relying on military food supplies. Although senior officers were committed to the idea of the offensive and forcing the enemy to fight, this was only resorted to after they had been outmaneuvered. From 1805 onwards, Napoleon developed the use of war as a financial motivation. Peace treaties imposed on defeated countries not only provided for maintaining of Napoleon's troops on their territory like food and shelter, but included the payment of massive indemnities. Prussia was forced to find 311 million francs after being defeated in 1806. War had become self-financing. The only consistent theme running through the years from 1800 to 1815 was Napoleon's hatred for Great Britain. Following the defeat of his invasion plan in 1805, Napoleon adopted another strategy to try to defeat Britain. He planned to destabilize the British economy by means of the continental system. This system envisioned blockading British trade by denying it access to European markets. The continental system had an important consequence for war, since it meant the need for further conquest to try to close mainland Europe to British exports. The weakness of Napoleon's enemies, Britain, Russia, Austria, and later Prussia, formed a series of anti-French alliances with each other, but they were continually undermined by their mutual suspicions and jealousy. Only Britain remained opposed to France for the whole period. The other three powers were tempted away from time to time by Napoleon's offers of territory. In the end, Napoleon rose quickly and brightly, conquering most of Europe, and those who didn't conquer used diplomacy to pull into the French orbit. But just as rapidly as he rose, he will crash.